Hello, everyone. My name is Noah Newman. I'm a fourth-year student at Wake Forest School of Medicine, and welcome to tonight's town hall. This past year's application cycle has certainly looked different than previous cycles. From NCAT delays to virtual interviews and second looks, these changes were the results of impressive responses to continuously changing circumstances and guidelines. Thank you to both the applicants and institutions that rose up to meet these challenges. If you received an acceptance to one or more medical schools, congratulations. If you did not get accepted this round, we want tonight to be an opportunity to better prepare you to succeed in the upcoming 2021 to 22 application cycle. First-time applicants will also find tonight's town hall helpful. So before we begin, I want to briefly have Abdallah. He's a recent graduate from Emory University. He's been involved in YPI for a long time now, and he's going to briefly talk to us about YPI, the organization that's hosting tonight's. So Abdallah.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to be here again. So YPI is an organization that invests in the underserved community primarily. Because in medicine, we've noticed that there is a lack of diversity, especially among physicians. And we wanted to cultivate that interest from the bottom up. And so what we're doing is that we're going out into the community, or in this case, in Pre-Med's portal, we're bringing medical admissions to you so that you can ask your questions, kind of humanize the medical admission officers, and so that you can see that they're also human too, and demystify all that the questions that you have, rather than going on Reddit or Student Doctor Network. So thank you for giving me this opportunity, Noah. I'm going to bring it back to you, and we're going to get started shortly.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Abdallah. So in just a second, we're going to be introducing our panel of medical school admissions faculty. They're going to be answering your questions and our questions. It's going to be a live Q&A format. Me and Abdallah will be helping to select those questions. I just want to give you guys a few pointers about sharing questions to make sure that everybody is able to get their questions in and get them answered. The first thing is try to keep them short. We can only post a question that's so long in length, it will cut it off if it runs longer than a couple sentences. So try to keep it concise. The second thing is if you have more than one question, feel free to share it multiple comments or multiple questions. You can ask as many as you like. There's no cap. And you can share these either through Facebook or YouTube in the comments section. The last thing is we usually receive more questions than we can answer. So we try to select the questions that we think the most viewers will benefit from. If you have a question that's really specific to you or your situation, try to consider how you can rephrase it so it can be applicable to more viewers as well. So last thing is we really appreciate your feedback. So please, at the end, please fill out our very brief survey. It takes 5 minutes. And once we get the results of that survey, we will randomly choose somebody to receive a set of Frank Netter anatomy flashcards. It's a great resource for incoming medical students during their anatomy time. So please go ahead, share this with your friends, and we're going to get started. So I'm going to turn to our panel. So first tonight, we have Dr. Daryl Rosenbaum. He is the admissions dean at Wake Forest School of Medicine. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you on tonight.
Yeah, my pleasure, Noah.
We also have Dr. Goodell. She is the admissions dean at Boston University School of Medicine. It's really nice to have you on tonight as well.
I'm delighted.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to start off by presenting a question to you guys, and we can kind of answer them one at a time, okay? So first question is going to be about applicants who might be waiting on an acceptance or are currently on wait lists. So this first question says, what advice might you have for those students who, maybe they're on your wait list or they're waiting to hear back? At this point in the game, it's late April. What kind of advice might you have for them in terms of considering reapplying or to continue waiting? And would anyone like to take a look at that one first?
So what I would say, the first piece of information to know is that April 30th is a really important date, and we haven't hit it yet. So the reason that April 30th is an important date for people that are sitting on wait lists is April 30th is the day that people that are holding multiple acceptances to multiple schools just have to pick one school. And every year there's at BU, we call it the melt, which is like basically there are more people that we accept. You know, we accept more people than we have spots for, because we know a bunch of people that we accept are going to decide to go someplace else, because our average applicant that we accept has 4 acceptances or something. So April 30th is a big deal, because there are all these people that have been like thinking about it, and they kind of want to, they're ready, so almost ready to make a decision, but not quite. And then April 30th is decision day. And so a whole bunch of people say, okay, that's it, I finally decided, I'm going to go to Wake Forest. And so they withdraw their application from BU and from wherever else. So that means that most of us medical schools are, it depends a little bit on how different medical schools do it, but a lot of medical schools don't see much action on the wait list until May. And that's just because we don't have any spots open up in the class until people make their decisions. So I would say it is definitely not time to feel hopeless quite yet, right? So that's going to be a big time. So hang in there a little bit. I think it is, if you have a school that's your favorite, then it is perfectly reasonable to let that school know that that school is your number one choice. And if you get in, you're definitely going. Not all schools care about that, but we do actually. And the only thing I would say is make sure that you only tell that to one school. It's not okay to kind of play a game and like, oh, I'm going to send that letter to every school. Really just reach out to the schools that you're very interested in attending. And then the other thing that you should be doing at this point, if you haven't had acceptances and you are on wait lists, is thinking about putting your application together for the next year. You want to, hopefully you will have had an opportunity to meet with an advisor to talk about what the story is with your application. And if you don't have an official advisor, maybe somebody else that could review your application and see what they think the weak spots are. If you need another year or more to address them, start making that plan, right? If it's really that your GPA is too low or that you need to make another run at the MCAT, give yourself the time to do that. If you need clinical experience, which was the issue with lots of people this year because COVID made it really hard to get clinical experience. So it's good to just think carefully about your application if you're going to need to reapply, and make sure that you're correcting any perceived deficiencies. And the last thing I would say is, please know that when I say things like perceived deficiencies, like, please know that those are not deficiencies as you, a human being. This is just like, there's a lot of, there's a lot of sort of luck, and even though we try really, really hard to make this process fair and humane, medical school admissions are not all that predictable. And so this doesn't have anything to do with your worth as a human being. It just is like, maybe you need to tweak some things and then try again.
That was a fantastic and very thorough answer. I really appreciate it. Dr. Rosenbaum, do you have anything to add to that? And then I kind of want to talk about some of the things that you mentioned, Dr. Goodell.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dr. Goodell in so many ways. I'll echo that. It's easy for us to say, but be patient. You have to look at this crazy process as a year-long or maybe even a 13-month-long process. So don't get too down, don't get too high. Just know that some people get accepted on June 30th and they become just great doctors here, like at Wake or BU, just someone who got accepted back in August. So hang in there. Number 2, be accessible. If you gave that email, check it every day. Be near your phone. People aren't going out of the country now, but be accessible. We had one example a couple of years ago where we gave an acceptance off the wait list, and she didn't get that message until after our deadline had passed, and she called, and we had already given away our last spot to somebody else, and she was crushed. But what was great about that situation is she immediately said, what can I do to get in next year? How can I? It showed so much about her. Unfortunately, she did get in the next year, so it was a happy ending. But be accessible. 3rd, be proud. If you're even on a wait list, that's amazing. I mean, we had 11,000 applications, and interviewed almost 500 folks. And if you're on the wait list, that says so much about you. So there's a lot of hope, even if it doesn't work out this year, and work on improving and come at it, with new energy and some of that confidence for the next cycle. And agree. We also value if someone is really truly serious about their interest in us, and we would be their top choice. We want to hear it, but use that wisely, and it needs to be something convincing. We can tell when someone's faking it.
Mm-hmm. That was great additions as well. I think it's really important that you both hammered in the message that, the fact that you've applied and gone this far already is really fantastic. And it's a lot of people, like you were saying, Dr. Rosenbaum, applying for very select spots. The wait list and not getting in should not say anything bad about you. It's really just a competitive process all around.
Yeah, I imagine this is true of Wake as well, but when you look at the applicant number compared to the interview number, like if you're on the wait list, that means that we would love to have you. Like, really, we think you're great. Like, there's no reason that we wouldn't want you. It's just a numbers thing. So,
yeah. And another point is some of my closest friends were accepted off wait lists, like few days before school even started. And they are some of the top performing students in the class. You should not kind of take where you are on a wait list or take where you are in the application cycle to mean something about you. So I think that's really important too.
That is completely true. If you need a little chip on your shoulder to give you that extra energy to do great in med school, sure, you could use it, but don't let that eat a hole in you. Don't let that make you feel like a second-class citizen. I have so many examples. We had a guy in my class who, he was kind of grumbling that first week that he had just flown down because he had been chosen at the last second, and now he's a cardiologist in Maine and has an amazing life and amazing practice, and no one's ever going to look back on that. We're all have a great career through this crazy process.
Right.
I got into med school off the wait list. Actually, I had gotten into a couple of med schools, but I got into my ultimate amazing dream med school off the wait list.
Wow, that's amazing.
I got accepted one place, and so I'm, incredibly thankful and every day. And that's, we all have different paths, and I don't know if I've ever even told anybody that before, but other than my parents. So,
well, I appreciate you sharing tonight. So this is actually kind of a good segue to my next question, which is going to be about, and you kind of touched on this already, but letters of intent. So what is the significance to you guys of a letter of interest or a letter of intent, whatever the proper term is, and how is that weighed by your admissions committee? You guys briefly touched on it, but maybe is there anything else you'd like to add about that? And Dr. Rosenbaum, you can start first.
Sure. I guess I would just kind of to go on that part of it needs to be true. It needs to be from the heart. And any facts that you can put in there to will always help. What is the reason why? Would you definitely come to Wake Forest or BU or something if you were accepted? Those are strong words that are not equivocal. Anything else is just going to be like, okay, that's nice, but and then even then, we can't always promise it's going to make a difference. But our wait list is pretty active, and we start school a little bit sooner than most, the second week in July. So we have a little compressed time frame, and we do consider how likely is somebody to matriculate with us, as well as how great a person they are and their scores and other things. So I can't give you an exact percentage of how much we weigh it, but it's factored in at our school.
Yep, it is for us too. And talking about the time frame, there's like a little bit of a matter of practicality about it. So when you're offering people spots off the wait list, like it's like a one-to-one offer, right? So if I've got one spot on the wait list, I have to call one person, explain the situation, like wait for them to get over their mini stroke. Then they have to think about it if they're ready to change their plans and move. They often have to get a financial aid squared away. They got to talk to their family, and then they have to get back to me. And that takes some time. And so I actually I can only do that one person at a time, right? It wouldn't be fair for me to call 5 people and see who answers first, or gets back. I was like, that's really mean. So the fact of the matter is, if I have, if I've got a bunch of people that I think are basically like, look, all these people would be great, and one of them has written to me saying, I am definitely coming if you offer me a spot, then I'm pretty likely to do it. And I agree about putting in the reasons why. And in case anyone's wondering, that includes personal stuff. Like, I really want to come to BU, and partly because my sister is a student there, or I really want to come because my fiance is a resident at, whatever, like XYZ hospital, something like things like that. You don't obviously have to have something like that, but like, just in case you were wondering if you should put stuff like that in, like, that basically means that I'll believe you if you say that you want to be in Boston. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Both you guys have kind of touched on that it needs to mean something more than just a generic or superficial answer, because there are a lot of students, I imagine, writing you guys saying that they want to come to your school. But if you really have a personal connection to that school, or there's some really good reason, to definitely include that for sure. That definitely makes it more genuine sounding.
We don't always remember every little piece, and so it never hurts to remind us again. I think we had one young lady on the wait list last year, and she reminded us, I moved to Winston-Salem because I really wanted to be at Wake Forest, and I'm a scribe here. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And that meant a lot to, like, hey, I forgot about how passionate she was, and I believed her when she said she would come if we accepted her.
For sure, you're dealing with details of thousands and thousands of people, so that extra reminder totally is important. So I feel like we can move on to another question. And this one was posted by somebody who was interested in, it looks like, a non-traditional application. So for this one, it says, non-traditional applicants that have taken few years since undergrad, is there a cutoff age for those prereq courses to apply to medical school? Like, I guess, do those expire after a certain number of years, or do they need to do a post-bac? I certainly do not know the answer to that question, but do you guys have any insights on that?
We don't have a firm rule about that. It kind of depends on what you've been doing in the meantime, and exactly how long you've been out of school, and a little bit how you did on the MCAT, and maybe a little bit like how much science did you take in college. So it's a very kind of case by case decision. I think if you graduated from undergrad in 2010 and you had a 4.0 and you were a psych major and you took, like the prerequisites and did well in them, but now it's been that long, I'd say we're going to probably want to see some more recent coursework. But again, there's no hard and fast rule. It's kind of case by case.
Yeah.
Completely agree. We're the same way. We don't have a hard and fast rule. You might need to get some advice from somebody who's involved in admissions or in a trusted pre-health advisor, whoever's at your school now, even if they weren't there when you were there back in 2010 or whatever, to give you that guidance. But yes, it depends. And I agree. If you took astronomy and rocks for jocks as your sciences back then and did okay on the MCAT, then we probably want to see some more recent pre-med type coursework.
Right. That makes total sense, because if you hadn't taken classes in so many years, I mean, to jump back into some really intense coursework in medical school would be really challenging. So I think also just personally it would really help you to take some courses more recently. That's interesting that it's sort of a case-by-case basis. So the next question I want to talk to you guys about has to do with out-of-state students. And so both your schools are private schools, if I'm correct. And so what percentage of out-of-state students get accepted to your medical school? I don't know if you guys have a number specifically, or just kind of a generic sort of range, if you guys know.
I think we're about 2/3 out of state, 1/3 North Carolina, but we have no absolute hard and fast rule or quota. We sometimes will consider it when it comes to waitlist season. We might say, well, is somebody nearby or someone who went to Wake undergrad, are they more likely to come? But that's rolling the dice as opposed to real details in the letters of intent and things we talked about already. So yeah, so we're open to all folks, but we do like people who may stay around because I love this area. This is my community, and it'd be nice if some more folks, from around here who then stayed and practiced to help the health of this region. But we absolutely don't have any set quotas or requirements.
Yeah.
Us either. And I don't know the percentage because I truly don't care. So it just doesn't matter. Like, and frankly, many of the people who are Massachusetts residents, like, have only been living there for a few years because they moved to Massachusetts after college to do research or something. So, because we have like so many hospitals. So yeah, it really totally doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think that's really good information for students, because I remember applying and thinking, well, gosh, is it even worth me applying to a school out in, Washington or Seattle if they're only going to take people from that geographic location? So it's great to hear that you guys are very open with where geographically students are applying from. And obviously that's probably case by case. Certain schools might have a mission to focus on in states.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for example, East Carolina here in North Carolina, they only accept in-state students. So you do a little bit of research, but at this point in the cycle, for schools like us, no, it doesn't matter. That's what makes part of our job fun, is working with people from all over.
Yeah. And it's made my job of being a student fun, meeting people from all over.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question I have for you guys, and I'm very curious to hear this one. Like we had mentioned earlier, this has been a very different cycle than previous. Do you guys have any data or any trends that you notice about how the numbers might have been different this year than others? Volume of applications, or competitiveness of the GPAs or MCATs? Have you guys noticed any of that changing this year?
Yeah, so I actually spoke about this a little bit in the media and stuff. So the national number of applications was up by 18%. For us, we had a 27% increase over last year, which is crazy. One of the things that was very interesting is that the average MCAT score and GPA did not go up. And that's because I think, you might think like, oh, with all those more people, and that's true, by the way, for the applicant pool as a whole, and also for the people that we accepted. The numbers are really the same as they've always been. And that's because I think that the increase in people this year, it was like not people that decided out of the blue to apply to medical school, right? Like if you're going to apply to medical school, it's like a multi-year planning process. You have to take all the courses. You got to study for the MCAT. That takes 6 months and take it. You have to amass all these different experiences, test out, whether you really want to do this or not. So it takes a while to be a competitive applicant. And so I think that like the increased number of applicants really was people who were thinking about applying to medical school, otherwise might have done something else this year, but then their job dried up, or their volunteer experiences they couldn't do that, or their research offer was rescinded, whatever. And so they decided like, well, I'll just go ahead and apply this year, and kind of throw my hat into the ring. So the applicant pool overall, although there were more people, I don't think that the people were competitive. I think it was kind of the same, and maybe people had fewer experiences than usual on average. Our numbers for MCAT and GPA were identical to last year.
Same here. We're up 16% number of applications. We broke our record by shattered it. But same way, when we crunched the numbers at the end of who we accepted, we kind of like had to do a double take. Like, really, it's the same. Even though we went into this thinking we're going to look at a wider variety of MCATs and GPAs, we really want to cast a wide net in this crazy year and always work and increase our diversity. And it kind of ended up about the same as far as the quality of applicants and their numbers and the breakdown. I think we had a few more applications from folks who would consider themselves underrepresented in medicine, but otherwise it was eerily similar as far as competitiveness.
That's so interesting to me because, gosh, 16, 18%, that's a tremendous increase in the volume of people applying. But I think that's a great point that you made, Dr. Goodell, about it's a year-long decision of applying. You can't just willy-nilly decide to make that decision. So it kind of makes sense why those numbers were similar.
And I hope it gives a little bit of, I don't know, like weight to the holistic admissions that we talk about, right? Like we had more applicants. Like if we wanted to, we could have like pushed up the GPA and MCAT people that we accepted, right? Like I had more people to choose from. I could have just picked more, people with high numbers, but like that's not what we're trying to do. Like we really are not. So to me, that actually maybe gives a little bit of like weight to the thing that we say, which is like, really, I swear this is not a giant filter that we put people through it and just catch the, like we're really trying to figure out who you are and what do you bring to the table, and pick the people that are the best fit for us. So,
yeah. I love that you're making the point that this sort of reemphasizes the holistic application process or review, because I think people get too stressed out about the numbers and not enough about their experiences and who they are as a person and maybe what's in their personal statements. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, we look at, we kind of take the approach of like, hey, folks who are in this range, they're qualified. They can handle the academic load, and like they have like a 94% chance of going through our curriculum just fine. So now let's focus on who are the people we want to work with and who are going to help each other and be great team players. And so, yeah, Kristen, that's a great point. I've never actually thought about it that way, but it is really reassuring to know that maybe this does show that there's a method to our madness.
Yeah, and by the way, for you guys that are thinking about applying that, when you said there's 94% of people make it through the curriculum on time, like I'm here to tell you, the vast majority of people who struggle, it's not because they're not capable. It's never because they're not capable. It's because like something else happens in their life and they have a stumbling block or whatever. But it's never because they can't do it. It's just because something else comes up.
Right.
Yep.
So the next question I want to ask you guys has to do, and I'm not sure how many details are shared with you guys in advance about the curriculum, but do you guys know if classes are going to be in person next year or is it going to be online?
Is it my turn to go first? I can't remember. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, normal's not the right word, but for all intents and purposes, and actually it wasn't too long that we were back. Our deans put it this way: if the purpose of the group or the class required people to be in person, we had it in person. We had anatomy lab in person. We had small group meetings in person. We just had to have fewer people in there at a time, or more space, and of course proper PPE and masking. It was more of like, not as many people came to lecture, but we still even had our lecturer come in person, because for the 20 people who learn better to treat it like a job and come into work and be there present and be able to ask questions live, there was plenty of space in that big lecture hall. So it's been, the only thing that was really affected was our orientation period that we, trying to get people for the first month, kind of get to know each other and all these kind of soft skills and teamwork and things. That was really difficult, especially the timing of where it hit in the pandemic last year. We're very hopeful that that's going to be not everything's going to be in person, but that's going to be even closer to normal as well. And our clinical students they're back on the wards just like the rest of us, with proper masking and precautions.
Yeah.
Yep, we are similar. We are going to be back in person, basically fully. Lecture classes for us have always been optional, and they've always been recorded. For the coming year, we're going to we're adding an option, which is in addition to being recorded, you can also watch it live via Zoom. So students have always kind of had that choice. But yeah, the small groups, anatomy lab, all that stuff is in person. There was an end to that question I saw on the bottom of the screen, which was something about, are there opportunities to get clinical experience in the beginning of medical school? That is something that varies a little bit from school to school, but for us, yes, you start off with doctoring you start right from the very beginning. When we start in August, and that's when doctoring starts. And you do start working with patients right away in the very beginning, like from the first week of that class. So that's when you learn, doctoring is where you learn like interviewing, physical diagnosis, and clinical reasoning. And you do some small group discussions and some in the hospital with patients. And as you're going along, whatever you're doing with patients is what you're learning in the small group, whether it's like take a family history or, get the history of present illness or do the abdominal exam, whatever.
Yeah, I was on the inpatient service in late July, and I was walking down the hall, and a student in a fresh, shiny, new white coat said, "Hey, Dr. Rosenbaum," and I was like, it kind of took me, and with the mask on, it was hard, and I was like, "Oh, hey," but so they were our first year students that first month were doing that exact same course that you talked about, Dr. Goodell, and it was great to see them, but it was kind of funny. I was like, "Oh yeah, you guys are up here. This is great." Just hard to recognize you with all the stuff on.
Yeah, it's been really nice to see students back in the hospitals at this point for the most part. But something you guys had both mentioned that I really like is the idea of options for students when they enter medical school. I mean, the way lectures are held is very different than in college with these recordings that you can watch live or you can watch recorded later or in person if that's how you prefer. So I really think that the concept of options has been really helpful in medical school, and it's great that both of your institutions allow so many.
Yeah, we've learned some stuff through this craziness.
So the next question I have for you guys has to do with the MCATs. And I think a lot of people at this point, maybe they didn't get into the schools they're interested, or they're waitlisted, or they haven't heard back at all. And they're concerned that their MCAT score is the biggest obstacle to admission. So how would retaking the exam impact a student? Is that something that you guys weigh differently, like a second or third try at the MCAT, or is that something you would recommend a student not even doing and just focusing on the rest of their application? And I guess, Dr. Goodell, it is your turn first.
Oh, okay. I forgot. Yes, if your MCAT is low, I suggest you retake it.
Okay.
It's pretty simple, but honestly, if you try something and you don't do as well as you want to do, and so you learn from that and you redouble your efforts and you try again, that to me looks like resilience and looks like learning. And I can promise you 100% that there are going to be things in your medical career that are not going to go perfectly the first time. And what we want is that you'll be able to take a step back, consider what happened, learn more, and try it again. So yeah, I think that's a great thing to do. And we basically we sort of look at all the scores, but we mostly count the highest one. So that's what we do. But like, we don't have a formula or anything. So when I say count, I'm talking about like when I report like, oh, this is what our median MCAT is, like we just count the highest one.
Okay.
Because it makes us look good.
That's totally fair. Dr. Rosenbaum, do you have anything to add?
We're very similar. We look at your best score. We don't look at the other one. We don't go, oh, gosh, look where they came from. And even if it was really low the first time and you made a great, well, that might say a lot about you. But mostly we just look at that first one, like I said, but really we're just looking to see who's qualified. And then, all right, you're in this bucket of other qualified folks. Now let's really look at it closely. But yeah, every challenge is an opportunity to show what you can do and how you can grow and how you can learn. So we do recommend no more than 2. Will we make exceptions? Yeah, probably, but we recommend no more than 2 because we also want you to go in with a plan. We don't want you to just, well, I'm going to go the first time and just wing it, see what happens. Oh, well, then I better take it a little more seriously, try it again. And now I'm really going to buckle down. That's where we start to say, can this person plan ahead? Can they learn? So yeah, and again, sometimes it depends. Could at the margins, if you had a rough, kind of a borderline GPA, does a higher MCAT more likely to help you? Maybe, as opposed to if you've got an awesome GPA and a pretty good MCAT, then I don't know if I would necessarily, because we understand the MCAT has some costs and some stress to it and things. So again, you can ask an advisor for help, but.
Right. And I think an interesting point about the MCAT is, gosh, that thing was such a pain in the butt to study for. And I get why a lot of people might say, oof, I didn't do well. It might not have impacted my admissions chance as well, but I really don't want to have to go through it again. But if you can really shine the second time, I mean, and show that resilience, that is impressive. I mean, to have to study for that test a second time around and then rock it.
And you could also think of all the work you've put in the years. Another few months, another go at it. That might be a drop in the bucket on a really long journey that could become a great career and a great life for you. So, keep it in perspective that we understand it's tough and there's costs and stress to it. At the same time, if you think about your big picture, and if it's been a 5-year journey, 7-year journey, another few months of, buckling down might be a small price to pay.
Right. That totally makes sense. It's a few months investment, but for a lifetime long goal. So it looks like the next question we have has to do also, again, with the MCATs, but specifically it looks like it has to do with how certain demographics might perform better or worse on the MCATs. Do we have the exact question prepared, or let's see? No. Well, so actually,
I can just talk about that if you want, because I said I would. So the thing to know about the MCAT and the performance that varies against different demographics is we all know that. Like, all admissions officers are aware of that. It's one of the reasons that holistic applicant review is so critically important, right? So we don't, and it's a reason to not have like a strict cutoff and say, okay, we never go below this. It's because, at least the way we view it, like, we would really be losing out on amazing doctors that way. So when we look at MCAT scores, it's part of an assessment of your readiness to enter medical school. If everything else is looking amazing and your MCAT is low, like, we're not likely to count that very heavily, especially if you are a person who belongs to one of the groups that we know is disadvantaged, like if you're from a lower socioeconomic status, or if you're from background underrepresented medicines, like, we know that. So then it gets less weight. Another example is this year, when we know that everybody's MCAT got totally messed up. And so people had studied for the MCAT, they had planned, they had done everything right. And then their test got rescheduled 3 times. And then they had to drive to another state to take it and stay overnight. I mean, it was a fiasco. Basically, when I was looking at applications this past year, if I saw somebody that had an MCAT score from June 21st, I was like, oh, okay. Clearly that was not a chance for them to put their best foot forward. So the thing that you have to do with the MCAT that we have to do with the MCAT is just always make sure that we're putting it in context. And the thing for you guys to know is that it is one piece of information. It is not your whole application. It often really helps students shine. So remember, another example of how it can be helpful is if people had a rocky start when they first got to college. But then you make an improvement. If you end up with a good solid MCAT score, then we're like, okay, they learned the material. Great. Then in that case, we don't care if you got, a couple of lower grades, and especially in the beginning. So it's really important to think about using it in context. And I want everyone to know that, like, we know this. We are aware of the demographic differences. We take them into account.
Right. That makes total sense. And again, it kind of goes back to the point that was made earlier about the holistic application. No one is just a number out of 528. There's so much more that goes in there. And based off of demographics and whatnot, you can kind of adjust what carries the weight in the application. I really like that. Okay. So the next question I have has to do with international students. So this says, given that international students are accepted in small numbers, are there recommended aspects of international applications or international students applications that is favored for acceptance? Apparently this one is BU specifically, but please, both of you guys, take us talk about it. And actually, I think Dr. Rosenbaum, it might be your turn first.
Yeah, ours will be short. For better, for worse, we only accept U.S. citizens or permanent residents. So I'm not sure I'll have much more to add, and I can yield the floor to Dr. Goodell.
Okay, so it's actually, I don't have that much to say about it either. there are not, so we evaluate international applicants just like we evaluate everybody else. There's no separate pool. There's no like specific things that we're looking for. You know, you're just kind of in there with the group. The important things to know about international applicants are really from the applicant side and not from our side. So for example, international applicants should be aware that it can be more difficult to get a residency. It depends also, it's all about the visa thing. Some residency programs don't want to deal with doing visa paperwork. And so if you have your heart set on being a neurosurgeon or being an orthopedic surgeon, that could be difficult for you. However, because like the residency programs are like, why? We have 1 million applications. We don't need to bother with that. And so, but you can be a doctor in the United States. You just might not be able to get your picked places, you know? However, that is not for us. That's sort of like for applicants to know. That is not a reason for us to keep you out of medical school. The second thing to be aware of is finances. If you are not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, you are not eligible for federal financial aid. We do not have special scholarship funds for international students. And as all of you, I am sure, are aware, medical school costs a fortune, and ours is one of the places that costs a fortune. So, but again, not a reason to keep people out, but it's a thing for applicants to be aware of.
Right. And actually, that kind of reminds me of a point that I think is important, is that some of these issues that might come up during the medical school application process are going to be things that come up when you apply into residency as well. So international student is certainly an issue that's talked about within the ERAS or residency application process. Board exams like the MCAT is for medical school, you take step exams for residency. These issues are going to come up again. So I think it's great that we're addressing these now, and I would recommend applicants keep these in mind because they'll come back in the future. So my next question I have for you guys has to do with applications in terms of getting feedback and improving the application. So if I submit my application and every place I do not get an offer from, is there a way that I can figure out maybe what wasn't working well on my application, what my weaknesses are, what my strengths are, what I can work on? I don't know if that's a role that the admissions committees can help play, or if that's something you would recommend students go elsewhere for. And I think Dr. Goodell.
I don't mind.
Or
Go ahead. Dr. Rosenbaum can go first this time.
Yeah, sure. This is a tough one. You know, we with 11,000 applications, as much as we'd love to give feedback, we never get started on the next cycle. If we tried to, we had to stop offering to give any kind of individual feedback. There's an exception, and again, it's kind of like that letter of intent thing we mentioned earlier, where we have an early decision program. Many of you might have done it for undergrad, where if you know Wake Forest is the place for you, then you can apply early decision. And if you get accepted, that's where you're going. You're kind of bound to come here. If you're truly, truly serious about that, I'm willing to talk with folks to give them some guidance as to, does that seem like it'll be a good fit? Here's how I see things going based on your last application. Here's what you maybe could do. But otherwise, I think I'd probably have to lean on your pre-health advisors. Do you know, I would caution against using just the average docs out in the world. I've heard some crazy stories about some weird advice and some opinions that you'll get from people who aren't as tuned into the admissions game as folks like us are. Use people who have been in touch with admissions, and that's where pre-health advisors, folks who are on faculty, if you can work some alumni connections through your undergrad to see if there's physicians in academic medical centers, they might be, good sources to review your application. And then another thing is look inside yourself. And we all know, looking back, like, did I cut and paste a lot of my answers to the secondaries? Because like for us, our secondary is huge. It's really, we ask those questions for a reason. And sometimes we can see when someone just kind of went through the motions or just was trying to, get 30 secondaries filled out. What areas do you think, you could have done better on, or sometimes that can help guide you as well.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, giving feedback personal to thousands of applicants would be way too hard. And certainly applicants will hopefully have resources at their colleges to help address some of those issues. I totally agree with your point that getting just general advice from a doctor that who graduated from medical school 30 years ago may not give you the best advice because they haven't been in medical school for 30 years. So I would really caution students on where they're getting their information from. And that's why we have fabulous people like you here tonight. Dr. Goodell.
I have a resource. Yeah, I have a resource to mention about that. So we're really in the same boat with a large number of applicants, but there is an organization called the National Association of Advisors in the Health Professions. It's NAAHP. And that's basically the professional group for all the health professions advisors at all of the universities. But get this, if your school doesn't have a pre-health advisor, or if you've been out of school a long time and you don't feel like you have access to one, if you go to that organization's webpage, they have a form you can fill out to request a volunteer advisor. So basically these are people that like have a job, but they will do some volunteer advising for people that don't actually have access to a health professions advisor. These guys are really, this is like what they do for their whole job, right? They know about all different medical schools. They can take a look at your application and say, this is what the weak points are. This is what the strong points are. So I think I would highly recommend that. Again, it's the NAAHP, National Association for Advisors in the Health Professions, and they have some volunteer advisors for people that don't have them. If though your school has one and you have access to them, they're going to be like, talk to your school's advisors, just FYI.
I had never heard of that resource before. That is really interesting.
And there are some also professional, like med school advising coach people that you can hire if you have $1 jillion extra dollars to spend.
That's what I'm going to retire. I'm going to take one of those consulting jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have another question. And this one has to do with clinical experiences during COVID. So a lot of people understandably have had trouble getting clinical exposure or experiences due to COVID. Do those students need to be worried that their application is going to be weaker, or are you guys taking this sort of stuff into account? Certainly, these are experiences they might have had this year, but they could have put on their application in years to come. So yeah, I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, I think the thing to keep in mind is that everybody in the country was going through the same thing, right? So, sure, we did see applications that had fewer experiences on them, but we know that, at my own giant hospital, there are no volunteers there. Our own medical students who normally in their first year, our medical students will take lots of opportunities to go shadow an ophthalmologist, shadow it, whatever, name your specialty that doesn't have a major clinical rotation. And our own medical students can't do that right now. So unless it's part of their curriculum. So we know that those experiences were few and far between. One thing I will say, so a couple pieces of advice though, we still need to know that you know what you're getting into. And so that's really what the clinical experience is all about, is knowing that you have had enough kind of exposure to medicine and medical care that you are aware of what you're getting into. You've thought about it a lot, and yes, indeed, you like it, and this is why you think you'll be good at it. So I guess what I would encourage is, first of all, I'll say I have been really impressed by people's creativity, the different ways that they found to have experiences, get experiences, and that includes both clinical experience, but also kind of community service type things, because a lot of those opportunities went away too. We really saw some impressive stuff this year. Another piece of advice is just to I have a very at least broad view of what I regard as clinical experience. So for example, somebody who worked as a personal care attendant for a disabled person, I would consider that to be clinical experience. It's not in a hospital setting, but you're caring for somebody and you're doing this sort of physical healthcare kind of stuff. The other little thing that I'll mention is, although volunteer experiences and shadowing experiences and definitely established programs and things kind of took a hiatus, what didn't find a hiatus is jobs. So people actually did really well this year with having an actual job where you got clinical experience, whether you were being paid to be an EMT or you were being paid to be a coordinator in a hospital or you were being paid to be a certified nursing assistant. So if that's a thing that you can do, like if you're lacking clinical experience, consider letting somebody pay you to do it, you know? And then you will probably learn a ton. Hopefully you'll learn a ton and then you'll be able to talk about what you learned.
I love that. I love the idea also of getting paid. I'm really excited for that day to come.
Just hang in there for another month or so.
Yeah.
Dr. Rosenbaum, anything you want to add to that?
I couldn't. I mean, it's like I couldn't co-sign that answer more. I mean, it is exactly what I would say. I mean, literally, it's like it's an opportunity to share your creativity. We understand we're trying to adjust our perspective. At the same time, it's about what you've learned about yourself. So it's not as important what you did. It's important, though. It's really important what you tell us. What did you learn? What was your process? How do you know you're ready for this journey? And yeah, there's chances to get involved. There's lots of patient care still happening. It just be maybe in real formal ways. But whatever it is, what did you learn from it? And we're not worried about checking a bunch of boxes. It's quality, and tell us what you discovered about yourself. What did you like? What didn't you like? What's a struggle? How did you grow? Do you know what you're getting into?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that both of you guys mentioned about understanding what you are going to take on for the next 4 years, plus additional years of residency, maybe additional years of fellowship, and then however long of a full career. I think too many people just think, oh, I'll apply to medical school and don't truly understand what it entails. So definitely get that clinical exposure, talk to doctors and residents, and peers who are in medical school and understand a lot of what that journey looks like. So guys, we are actually wrapping up. It has been almost an hour. So what I want to do for this last portion, and thank you both so much for being here, is ask you both to share one kind of piece of insight or reflection or something that you just want to highlight to the students that you heard or said. It can be anything, just a parting piece of advice, really, that you would have for applicants. And I know I threw everyone on the spot with that one, but I'll go first, actually. So the piece that I would give students, because we touched on this a few times, was the idea of holistic applications. A lot of people express concerns with numbers, GPAs, number of clinical exposure opportunities, but you can't just focus on the numbers in my mind. The people I've talked to who are my classmates have had really interesting experiences and have had lots of cool things to say about those experiences. And that means so much, clearly not only to an admissions committee, but also to a colleague, to patients, when you can share that sort of stuff. So just really think about what holistic means and how you can bring a lot to the table as a whole person and not just a set of numbers. Who would like to go?
I'm going next.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'll go ahead. I guess for folks who are in the waitlist situation, I'll just reiterate, be proud and hang in there. And I guess the extra little piece of advice that I wanted to mention that I didn't say before is run through scenarios in your head. What if school A and school B call you on the same day and say, hey, we want to offer you a spot? Just practice, think about it. Think about the different factors, compare the schools, the tuition, for closeness to home, all those things that we're going to go in, and just so it doesn't totally freak you out and you got to decide in 3 days and you're not a basket case, that you've kind of prepared a little bit. And for those who are just in an application cycle next year or 10 years from now, I guess I was an English major, so I love writing and editing and telling stories. But number one, before you start opening that laptop, put it down and think, well, what do I want to get across? Who am I? What's my mission statement? What's the one sentence thing I want to get across? And everything else should flow from that. And I say, show us, don't tell us. Don't say I like to help people. Don't say I know what it's like to be a doctor. Give me a story. Give me an anecdote of you in action where I automatically understand that. You don't have to tell me, because I'm living this narrative that you're giving to me. And again, just that same idea of we humans, we like stories. We don't like lists and we don't like brag. Give me a story and I'm going to be a captive audience. I'm going to enjoy the process. Just list a bunch of things and say a bunch of generalities and I start to glaze over. So.
I love that. That's great advice.
Let's see. I think that my biggest piece of advice is to sort of make sure that you're telling your story. I think I get all the time questions about like, well, what's the better way to spend my gap year? Should I do this or should I do that? Or which classes do you think are better to take? Should I take this class or that class? Should I do research or should I? And I'm like, well, what do you like the best, right? Like what you should do is the thing that you are the most excited about and the most passionate about. Like you will do the best at that. That is like, you'll do your best work if you're doing it. And by the way, like medicine is this super long haul career. I actually had this conversation with a colleague who came and said, oh, can you talk to me about work-life balance? Because I think that I'm awesome at work-life balance. But the reason that I think that I'm awesome at work-life balance is because I really love my work. Like most of my work, this doesn't feel like work to me, you guys. I'm on vacation starting as soon as I finish talking to people. So the fact that like, this is like, I should be packing my bag right now, but I actually really like it. Like, this is fun for me. So choose the things that are fun for you, because then it's going to help you like kind of be excited about your work, be in there for the long haul. And then when it comes time to put your application together, when you're telling us about these things that you did, it's going to come through. Like if you are excited about something, I know this sounds weird, but I really like much of the time we can tell what was important to you. Like it just sort of shines through in the words you use to describe your experiences and like what you say in your personal statement. And so like do the things that excite you, tell us about those things. And then like find a medical school that fits you as opposed to the other way, like trying to be like the best possible applicant so you can get into the maximum number of schools. Like don't do that. Be who you are, you know?
Yeah, I think that's also tremendous advice. Medicine is certainly a long path, and gosh, even I feel like I'm just starting it and I'm almost done with my 4th year, but there's a long road to go. So taking time to enjoy the things that you enjoy, that's going to make a really interesting narrative and application like both of you guys mentioned. That's great advice. Well, I want to say a big thank you to both you, Dr. Rosenbaum, Dr. Goodell. We posted a feedback link in the comment section. So if you tuned in tonight, please just take a few minutes to fill that out so we know how to continue improving and making it better. But thank you again to our guests tonight. Special thanks to Abdallah, and I'll add him back in. He did a great job helping to manage the scenes from behind. Thank you, Dr. Kelly, who gave us the platform. Thank you to Daniel Kaganoff. He's a student that helped make our videos. To all of our viewers, share this with your peers, your institutions. We want to reach as many people as possible and help as many people as possible. You can find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the media. And check out our website for more information and to see previous live streams. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great rest of your nights.